Okay, from Sacharitha.
So while we're still bringing up panelists, I'd like to thank everybody for being present today. And we'll begin in just a few minutes, getting all of our panelists up on the WebEx.
Are you on the phone call? Can you give me a shout out if you are? Yourself.
Do you see Alex Warwicks as well?
He is here now and making him a list. Okay, so we have everybody but Kelly, and I'll keep checking up on her, Wendy.
Okay.
So, sorry, Dr. El-Amin, do you want to go ahead and get started with folks?
Sure. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank everybody for being present today. I'd like to thank our panelists for taking the time to engage in a deeper dialogue. The title of our session today is Finding a Way to Healing, Addressing Race-Based Trauma in an Anti-Racist Institution. One of the things that I want to do first is I want us to recognize that today is actually a National Day of Mourning. Today was the day that George Floyd was buried. And I want to make sure that we understand why we're here. As an institution, we have decided that we will be an anti-racist institution. This is something that has been placed in our strategic plan. We have been working for many years to move to this point, to be able to declare this and to put more action behind the work that we're doing. But this is an institution that definitely has been doing things. There are things that we can move beyond where we are right now. And I'm hoping that everybody considers themselves an equity ambassador to be able to get us to the next place. All of us have experienced what's going on in different ways, but I do believe that we have a collective grief that is happening. Today, when George Floyd was buried, one of the things that we acknowledged is that police brutality was the reason why he was murdered. And I want to make sure that we have a deep understanding of what police brutality is. It's defined as a civil rights violation where officers exercise undue and excessive force against civilians. This includes, but is not limited to, physical or verbal harassment, physical or mental injury, and property damage or death. I do believe that if we do not speak words, if we do not acknowledge the things that are happening, then it's very hard for us to address those things. Before we introduce our panelists, I want to give the quote that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar noted that I felt was very poignant. He just recently wrote an op-ed in Los Angeles Times, and he said, "Racism in America is like dust in the air. It seems invisible until you let the light and the sun in. Then you see it everywhere. As long as we keep shining the light, we will have a chance of cleaning it." And that's one of the reasons why we are trying to dive down into a deeper discussion. This is just the beginning of these types of discussions. Hopefully we'll be able to have more. I'm hoping that you all chime in on the chat. But I wanted to introduce our guest. If we could start with Christine Todd. I'm not going to call you a guest. You're going to assist me in moderating today. But if you want to introduce yourself, Dr. Todd. Are you on mute, Dr. Todd?
Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to tell you that there are over 80 of our SIU community attending this chat right now, which is a fantastic attendance. So welcome. My name's Christine Todd. I'm the chair of Medical Humanities and a wellness advocate with the Center for Human and Organizational Potential. And I'm so glad that we're able to have so many of you join in this venue to listen and share this evening. And Wendy, just so you know, Kelly is on the call. Her video doesn't come up, but she is here and she's unmuted.
Okay, wonderful. That's all we need. She has a very strong voice. So next, I'd like to introduce Dr. Cruz, and I want to thank Dr. Cruz for also being bold enough to say that we are moving into becoming an anti-racist institution, because anti-racism is a very transformative concept. It says that we are going to reorient ourselves, that we are going to re-energize ourselves, and that we are going to start having more conversations around the action that needs to happen to make sure that we're addressing racism. So if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Well, I'm Jerry Cruz. I'm the Dean and Provost of SIU School of Medicine, and happy to be here tonight, and we'll be happy to make any comments that you'd like me to when the time is appropriate. And we are embarking on a new journey, and one that's difficult, but we're ready for it. That's all I'll say to begin, but just let me know if you want me to move forward with that.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to introduce Dr. Kimia Saraf. Can you introduce yourself, Dr. Saraf?
Good evening, everyone. I would like to thank Dr. El-Amin and Dr. Todd for putting this forum together tonight. It's my pleasure to be here. I'm a physician. I am a trauma specialist, and I work specifically with physicians and professionals around academic, institutional, and professional trauma. And I'm very pleased to be here and be with you this evening.
Great, thank you. Our next guest is the future Dr. Alexander Warricks.
Hello, everybody. My name is Alexander Warricks, current M3 and rising M4 soon to be. I'll be applying to internal medicine next year. Glad to be on this panel and sharing experiences and opinions with you guys today.
Thank you. The next one is the future Dr. Beret Madden.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Beret Madden. I'm a rising third year here at the university. I am also one of the co-presidents of the Student National Medical Association, and I'm very glad to have this opportunity to speak with you all.
And Dr. Sasharitha Bowers.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much, Dr. El-Amin, for inviting me to be a part of this, and Dr. Todd for co-hosting this. And I am in the Department of Internal Medicine in the Division of Dermatology. I'm a program director for the residency program for dermatology, and I'm also the vice chair for health equity for internal medicine and an equity ambassador. And I just want to add that I am incredibly humbled and honored to be a part of this institution that has declared itself to have a racist institution that's really pivotal and profound, and it's just very, very meaningful to be a part of these efforts. So thank you for having me.
And we have Dr. Wesley McNeese.
Yes, I'm Dr. McNeese. I'm a retired emergency physician, and I currently work part-time as SIU System Director for Diversity Initiatives.
And Kelly Hurst is actually on the call. Can you introduce yourself? You're not able to see her, but her voice is available to be heard. I have never heard Ms. Hurst muted before, so this is an interesting experience. Okay, well, we'll give her some time to come back in. So Dr. Cruz, I'm just to kind of engage in this conversation. Make note that, I think, is that Kelly Hurst? Okay, I do want to make note that this, sometimes these conversations are very hard to have, and I appreciate, people being present and being able to be vulnerable with us and to be able to share this space. I know that I'm very full today, having witnessed the funeral today and standing for 8 minutes and 46 seconds in solidarity was a profound experience. So I appreciate you all moving forward on this day. But Dr. Cruz, You made a very bold move to put in your strategic plan to say that we are an anti-racist institution. Can you talk with us a little bit about why you stepped forward to do that, what that means to you, and a little bit about what your journey into this is, because we do know that it is a continuum that we're experiencing.
Well, it certainly is continual. We need to make sure that it's not slow now, and I'll comment on that as I move forward. For me, it was just a gradual accumulation of things that happened over a period of time, and things that came as experiences for me, one after the other, and it became certainly clear and driven home by the Crossroads experience that the issues were actually deeper than I had known before, and that things were rooted not only in the actions that we see, but deeply in policies and procedures and board membership and history that I didn't know. So after more time with that, and Wendi, discussions with you about anti-racist organizations, it seemed appropriate that we take that firm step in our strategic plan. Now, historically speaking, first of all, I will tell you that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is my favorite basketball player of all time. I was a student at the University of Missouri undergrad when he was graduating from Power Memorial High in New York, and he wanted to be a journalist. That was his aspiration. And he had narrowed his choice down to what he thought were the two best journalism schools, UCLA and the University of Missouri, from which John Chancellor had graduated. Well, he picked UCLA, and the rest is history. But I followed him ever since then. And if you haven't read his writings or seen him on TV, and he was on for over an hour last night, and he was fabulous. And I just want to say one other thing about history. As we've seen things written and we've listened to the various broadcasts, I have heard a lot of things about Dr. Martin Luther King talking about the fierce urgency of now. And it was referenced a lot of times from his I Have a Dream speech in 1963. But he also, in a sermon in 1967, Beyond Vietnam, talked about that. And I just want to read two lines about what he said about it, one from each of those, that one the speech and one the sermon. I Have a Dream. This is no time to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now, some things will be gradual, but that's a bold statement. That's true, I think. And then listen carefully to this one from the Beyond Vietnam speech. He warned us that the failure to heed the fierce urgency of now may render our aspirations for peace to join the bleached bones and jumbled residues of numerous civilizations where are written the pathetic words, too late. So I think we're kind of getting late in the game. But in both of those speeches, he had a way of bringing everything around to systems and contexts and a global look. And actually said in the last sermon there, blacks and whites in the destinies of blacks and whites in the United States are inexorably bound. And so there are, I'll say two quick things. First, there is a culture change and a systemic change that has to happen. That's slow and that's tough, and a lot of people have to get on board, but some people have to take the lead. Some organizations have to take the lead. So I think we should influence others. The other one are things that can happen quickly. And again, as I've listened to things, there are a short list of things to be done and implemented quickly to cut down on police brutality and excessive force. And there's another set of things by things like Campaign Zero and others that can happen quickly. Both of those things, one's a kind of immediate advocacy and the other one is a change from within. And I don't know exactly how it can be done, but I think we've got the process started here. So I'll listen to others with more wisdom than I have to take that forward. So thank you.
Well, one of the individuals that we were trying to get to speak on the panel is Kelly Hurst still there? She's still muted? Okay. One of the things that you mentioned was Crossroads, and I wanted to make sure that people understood what Crossroads was.
Dr. El-Amin,
Yes.
she's muted. Kelly, can you shout out? Can we hear you? Going on her audio, Wendy, but she's not muted, and she's replied to me in the chat.
Okay.
Let me just say this. Sometimes when people are not muted, for some reason, the audio on their computer doesn't work and they have to use the telephone call-in number. So that would be the next troubleshooting piece there.
Okay. Well, I was going to call on Kelly Hurst next because she's actually a trainer in Crossroads, which is an anti-racism training program that many members of our institution have been going through. I'll actually talk to Dr. McNeese next because he actually started many people going through this training. Dr. McNeese, are you able to unmute and talk with us a little bit about why you felt it was important to embark upon that journey for people to start going through the training? It's a 2.5-day training, and it definitely made a difference in my life, the way that I started to see the world. Even as an African-American woman, my eyes were open so much that I had to go 4 times. And I try not to miss it whenever it does come through. So Dr. McNeese, can you talk with us a little bit?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. We can't see you, but we can hear you.
Oh, okay. I can see myself.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wendy,
All right.
I can see everybody. It kind of goes in and out sometimes. I can see you, Wes.
Okay, great. So I think it's phenomenal that the SIU School of Medicine has determined it will be an anti-racist organization. On a day of so much sadness, that's just a phenomenal thing to hear. And I've always believed that people need to have training in anti-racism. You know, there's an author by the name of Ibram Kendi. He says, the opposite of racist is not racist. The opposite of racist is anti-racist, which is a word of action. And so I've always wanted individuals at the School of Medicine, and now even in the SIU system, to actively work against racism. And part of that is training. And we were fortunate in 2009 to connect up with Crossroads, a national anti-racism training organization. And because the dean was willing to try, and I think I was working with John Record and some other people at that time, we were able to begin anti-racist training within the School of Medicine, and it has only grown over time. Large numbers of our faculty, student, and staff have gone through that training, and I believe that the training is bearing fruit right now.
I'd like to ask Dr. Saraf, you're a trauma-informed coach along with being a physician. You know, right now we're experiencing just profound trauma from COVID, and then that was the initial crisis that we were experiencing, and then we started to experience another crisis on top of that. And I want to make sure that we are having a trauma-informed response to how we're moving through this space. Can you talk with us a little bit about how your work is needed more now than ever?
Thank you, Dr. El-Amin. I think you hit one of the big nails right on the head out of the gate. We were, you know, trauma encompasses a lot of different things, and we were sort of in the midst of this global trauma of COVID to begin with, which was something that was being shared across the board. And it's been commented many times, and I think it's accurate, while we were all in the same COVID ocean, not all of us were in the same boat, right? Some people were able to ride COVID out in much greater comfort and much greater safety and with much less risk than other people were, but definitely all of us were experiencing it. But that was what we would consider to be an acute trauma. And we have now added to that a very, very high acuity trauma that we are experiencing nationally and in our communities and in our neighborhoods and in ourselves. That is, it's calling up a lot of different things for a lot of different people, and it shows up in different ways in different places that require that we hold space in ways that maybe many of us haven't been taught to do, that we give voice in ways to people that maybe we haven't been trained to do in the past. Dr. McNeese and you both touched on the fact that it is not enough to be merely not racist. We must be actively anti-racist. And that requires an unlearning of many, many things that many people have learned over a lifetime. And for some people, that can be a very difficult unlearning, as well as a learning of how to move and how to hold space for people who need their voices and deserve to have their voices amplified, and also how to provide sort of the three main components of a trauma-informed approach and of trauma mitigation. We can all be real-time trauma mitigators for each other in this. We can also all be real-time trauma amplifiers for each other in this if we are not careful. And to mitigate trauma at its base, we need to all learn to listen, protect, and connect. And these are things that mitigate trauma real time for one another. And they're skills that all of us can learn and can practice and can hold each other with. So a lot of that happening right now.
You're muted, Dr. El-Amin.
I'm sorry. I almost feel like this whole WebEx thing with having to mute yourself and unmute yourself is a whole nother micro trauma. But one of the things
I was just about to say that. Learning, trying to do this when we can't share space with each other is very difficult. That adds a layer to this, a layer of complexity to this that is very, very difficult to unwind.
This is the most vulnerable that I have ever felt having to speak, because I can't see the people, I can't feel them, I can't hear them, I don't know who's in the room, but I'm just going to keep moving on with profound trust. But one of the things that you mentioned is that there's a quote that says, sometimes when you're always tiptoeing, you can never leave a footprint. I can't remember the name of the woman who, but she actually won the Nobel Peace Prize. But I want to talk to the future Dr. Wendi El-Amin and the future Dr. Alexander Warwicks. I'm giving them those micro affirmations now more than ever, because to be a student in a time like this, when you have to compartmentalize your world to be able to study, knowing there are all these things that are going on, I keep trying to remind them that your greatest community service, your greatest level of activism is becoming another African-American physician in the world. So the future Dr. Madden, can you talk with us a little bit about what your experience has been like? Make sure you unmute yourself.
Yes, I'll make sure I do that. Hello, everyone, again. I spoke about this briefly on the conference that we had before, but it's been really hard knowing that as a Black student, you are trying to make a difference by doing your study and doing what you need to do to stay on top of your work. But a part of you also feel like, as a Black student, as a minority, who this could be my brother, father, uncle, I should be doing more instead of just sitting and studying. So a part of me feels like I have to pick my day where from 8 to 5, I'm in my U world, I'm doing my questions, and then I can become an activist after 5 p.m. when I can then relate back to my world. And it's just been very conflicting for a lot of us, and a lot of students feel the same way when we've had our talks. But I think the joys of these conversations. And out of these conversations, with us becoming an anti-racism school, I think it's more, we want to see more reform, more policy change, more things actually being institutionalized instead of just always having these conversations and not acting upon them. So it's good to know that the school has actually stepped forward in moving towards a more positive light, saying that we're here with you and we're going to change. Last but not least, I would say like my favorite quote from the anti-racism was the last statement when it was like, we stand beside our African-American sisters and brothers. We support you, we will fight for you, and we are with you. And I think once we all get on that same page, we can move forward.
Yeah. At the solidarity procession the other day, when I looked and I saw one of my colleagues in front of me, it spoke volumes. It spoke volumes to me and my daughter, you know. And when my daughter saw people that she recognized, the whole cheerleading team at her group, she said, "Mommy, they're here." And I think people need to know that. So Alexander Warricks, can you give us some of your experience and insight during this time?
Yeah, of course. Well, during this time, it is pretty hard with what's going on. It's hard to not create a narrative in your mind that, you know, in this country, no matter what you do as a Black male or a Black individual, you're only a target, or you're only seen as certain because of your skin color. I've even had some experiences, you know, we all know those things called microaggressions. And even in first year of at SIU School of Medicine, not faculty, but staff was like, "Oh, so you got to be here in the summer meeting, right?" And I'm like, first of all, why are you assuming that I'm going to, you know, fail? So I'm like, wow, this institution really thinks that I'm automatically going to fail just because of the way I look. And I'm very happy, I'm very proud, especially that we have a dean and a school that from like immediately went to announce we are an anti-racist institution. And I think it's just super important that we get that support and we're willing to fight towards equality and equity for everybody.
Great. It's Kelly Hurst. I want to make sure I'm getting her voice if she's in here. Okay, and Dr. Bowers, can you give us some of your insight from being a leader in the DICE in internal medicine?
Can you hear me?
Oh.
There she is, Wendi.
Oh, okay.
I just delayed.
Am I unmuted? Okay, great. So, well, before we bring in Dr. Bowers, because I think she has a great example of the work that DICE has been doing, some of the departmental work, because we have to keep creating opportunities for each department to become more involved in this type of work. And I think that people are open to doing that, but we're needing to create that roadmap together. But Kelly Hurst, can you make some comments? I'm hoping that you've heard some of the conversation. Being a person who has done some of the training, can you talk with us a little bit about what are some of the essential elements when people are declaring that they will be an anti-racist institution that we're putting in place to be able to move forward?
Sure. And I should say I've heard all of this. That has been the most frustrating part that I could not get in. I apologize. I just got on a different computer, which is a real admission of being very comfortably quarantined, isn't it? That I have more than one that I can use. And part of what I've been hearing and listening to and very appreciative for are all of the values that we continue to talk about in anti-racism and what matters in actually shifting an institution. And that lies in the values. Where are the values of the institution? Once an institution can line their values up and a mission statement up, and actually you can take any issue, you can take this current, once again, Black Lives Matter issue, or you can look at multiple other issues that people of color have had and apply that lens and say, is it accountable to people of color? I think that's always often the missing piece. It's not being accountable to them because so many other diversity and inclusion efforts sometimes are simply just for the numbers, but not for the values of the institution to change. Just to say we need X number of Black faculty. And even coming from that perspective is very deficit. So I would also say the other values that we talk about are the transparency. And I've heard that. I've heard that from Dean Cruz. I've heard that on this call. I've heard that from multiple people, the transparency of what SIU School of Medicine wants to be and not being afraid to name it.
Great, thank you. We have recently seen the movie Just Mercy. We did a viewing in the community, and many people came out for that. And he talks about being proximate, how you must be proximate in order to understand what's going on. And I think right now the narratives that people have are so critical. Some people are saying, "Oh, well, there's a riot here," and I said, I was actually there with my daughter. I don't think that definitely wasn't a riot. Are we talking about the same place? The narrative is so critical with how people are being addressed as we're kind of moving through. When we talk about being proximate, we have been out in the community. We're known for our social accountability, but we also have to expand that footprint, and we need to make sure that we're touching all places. And we've been doing that through the COVID pandemic. But Sasharitha Bowers, Dr. Bowers, can you talk with us a little bit about your work with DICE and bringing that into a department, how that has been? Are you able to unmute?
Yes, thank you. Yes, so DICE started under the leadership of Dr. Stewart, and it stands for Diversity, Inclusion, Community Engagement, and we've added the equity portion of that as well. And really the efforts of it have kind of, over the course of the last few years, they've sort of transformed and they've evolved. Initially, our efforts in DICE were centered around really bore out of community engagement is where it started. And we're actually kind of coming full circle back to that. And along the way, we've added an educational component with educating our department around why we do the diversity, inclusion, and equity. What's the why to it all? Why do we care about equity? Why must we care about equity? What does that even mean? How does that translate for a bunch of doctors and healthcare providers who are involved in evidence-based medicine? How does that translate into health outcomes? And what does that actually mean when you're doing equity work? So we started with education, and we're going to continue to have that component for our department members. And it's important to us, and I lead this alongside Patrice Jones, who has a long history in community organization and just a phenomenally brilliant and accomplished woman. And she brings her community organization perspective into this. And this really touches on the proximate portion of what you were just talking about, Dr. El-Amin, in that we really, this is something I have learned. I am so early in this journey myself. I'm sort of learning how to, I think someone used the analogy, you're kind of building the plane as you're flying it. And I very often feel that way. And initially it was kind of gave me reservation to be, to be in any kind of leadership position around this. But, what I've learned is really what you need is just the passion and the desire and knowing that this is something you want to demand of yourself and of the workforce. So we've jumped in and we are working to really bring that community component to this, to equity work. And one thing I've learned through Patrice is the importance of having your community guide you. We can learn all about equity data, but how does that apply to the actual lived people that we are communicating with and we're supposed to be taking care of in our clinics, or we are not taking care of in our clinics, and why aren't we taking care of them appropriately or getting them what they need? So that's really something that's unique, I think, about what we're trying to do. And what's so phenomenal about what now the school is doing under your leadership and Dr. Cruz, your leadership, is that we can see all the pieces of these puzzles that have been moving, throughout the course of the last few years coming together. and kind of moving in concert with each other. And I just think that's incredibly powerful, and our impact will be so much more effective and productive that way. And so I just have to once again reiterate how important this is, that we're bringing the different pieces of the puzzles together now.
Great. Thank you. I was just on a call with Dr. Mahoney, and he's wanting to have larger conversations system-wide and to really hear from the students of what they're experiencing. And Dr. McNeese is really working with our full system to make sure that we're all moving in accord. Because I think that on a recent town hall at the NAACP that we were doing for COVID, a gentleman said that the power needs to be where the pain is. And I said, that's a great phrase, that if we can make sure that the people who are in pain are coming up with the solutions and that we're just standing beside them to make sure that it's happening, then we can't make a mistake. But if we're telling people how things should be done, we don't even have the same lens that they have. So I think that one of the things Dr. Todd said, that we had a couple of questions in the chat that I'm not able to see. Do you want to bring those out so that we can start to create a deeper dialogue?
I sure will. There have been a couple questions that come through that I think are really and get to different perspectives here. So the first one is from one of our medical people, our learners. A lot of the education required to eradicate racism is more than one-time conversation or class. It requires active learning. And will there be changes to our education to include more learning about racial injustice in relationship to healthcare? A great question.
I love that, because I would love to be able to have more space than, right now we have the equity PAC, which I feel like is a 3-hour water hose, and it's hard. It needs to be longitudinal throughout things. And then we have a different institution in that our first years are down in Carbondale, and then we have students that are here second, third, and fourth year. So one of the challenges is that if we can't start having these conversations in first year, different things have already started to gel and to tighten, that if we can do things from the beginning. So I think that, we'll have been working very closely with the Department of Medical Education to look at how we can start to infuse things throughout. We even have an anti-bias curriculum committee now that has been going through the curriculum, because medicine constantly changes. And if we're using some of the same cases from, 20 years ago, there's bound to be stereotypes and different things in there that we have an opportunity to change. And Dr. Klayman has really, been open to us trying to do some of this, but it's a huge volume of work. And the more people we have on board to be able to do that, but hearing that from the student, I think is pivotal for us to be able to say, and it's going to have to, because there's a new thing that's happened in history. Dr. McNeese, you were going to say something?
I wanted to say that historically, there have always been individuals at the SIU School of Medicine who have been allies and who have been teaching and advising and helping move the needle on diversity and inclusion, equity, education. They have always been there. There are more of them now, and I don't believe the job should just be yours. I actually believe that it should be infused throughout the whole institution. There should be all kinds of people who are teaching this at their levels, wherever they are working. That's what should be happening, and that will do the trick.
Well, I'm sure you can see my big smile on my face.
Hey, Wendy, this is Jerry. Could I make a comment here?
Please.
So, the curriculum is an organizational structure, and it fits in with the definition of anti-racism, anti-racist organization that we're moving toward. And I would just echo what Wes had to say. It can't fall on the shoulders of you or a small group of people. Somehow, as we examine that curriculum, we have to think more broadly about how we develop a lot more leaders to do that. It came to my mind that, perhaps the Crossroads training might be a good thing to do in Carbondale for the first year medical students. And I know Nancy Henry's on this call, and she's already made a comment about that. And, You know, we've not gone, even for the faculty and the staff down there too. So, you know, starting early, I think is a real good thing. And, you know, my only other comment about this is there are a lot of dimensions to this. And Wendy, you know that at one gathering, a couple of students who we thought were doing quite well and did quite well at SIU School of Medicine, you know, mentioned to me that they were very lonely throughout their years here. And I think something as simple as that, you know, if we can, as an institution organization, if we can understand what that is and develop processes for that, it might be another piece of helping all this permeate our educational environment.
Yes, I think that in our strategic plan, one of the things that we've been trying to work with is how can we even get more trainers here, you know, that are part of faculty to be able to go through, to be able to assist, because as opposed to us sending people, then it's part of our infrastructure that we can call on them for support.
Dr. El-Amin, there were two comments in there that I thought were really important that I'd like to sort of pull the thread on, if I might, for just a second. One was the comment made just a few speakers back who said, you know, and I think actually it was you, who said that it's very important that we allow the voices of those who are harmed to be the ones who help point the way forward. And that is a very, very trauma-informed way of approaching all of this, and a really, really important way, because one of the ways in which we often re-traumatize people is by fixing things for them. And you know, it's a very historically, it is a very common way that we rush in to make things better. We legislate, we educate, we fix for, but it is much more trauma informed to hold that space, that which comes around to Dr. Cruz's comment that, you know, there are folks who come out of our medical education seeming to have done extremely well. But when they reflect back, say, you know, I was very, very lonely. I felt like I was the only one. And the number of times that I hear that, and that also goes to imposter syndrome and educational trauma and institutional trauma that we see often perpetuated over and over again. The sense that I'm the only one who feels like I've taken everybody out to get here. I'm the only one who feels like somebody's going to walk up to me one of these days and say, we know you don't belong. There is no possible way you could have ever achieved what you need to be here. And when we begin to connect with one another and to really truly listen and hold space for those kinds of conversations to happen, people become less lonely, but they also become less traumatized by the process, because there's nothing quite like hearing the words, yeah, me too, I feel that way too, I've experienced that too, to help begin to mitigate some of that trauma. One of the things we often say in trauma spaces is there's nothing better for the human body budget than another human. The downside of that is that sometimes there's nothing worse for the human body budget than another human too. So we got to make sure that the humans we're connecting with are ones that are mitigating our trauma, not amplifying it.
Yeah, I think one point that you made that I want to amplify is that sometimes it's not in our head that we are looked at that we don't belong. When you walk into a patient's room with your long white coat on and the patient hands you a tray and says they want some chicken. Oh, I'm Dr. El-Amin. I'm sorry, I'm not here to take your tray, but I'll take it for you. But I'm your doctor. The stereotypes that permeate when you look at our Black males right now, we only have 540 Black males in medical school in the entire United States. So when they show up, it's like, oh, you know, so I think that exactly what you said, that we have to keep supporting the ones that are here and hearing what their experiences are. And I know, you know, Alex, that was a lot for you to share that experience, but if people don't know what's going on, then they're not going to be able to change things. Christine, did you have another question?
Yes, I have so many more questions. Questions about Crossroads, about encouraging the fact that if the institution could make Crossroads available to many more people in the institution, that would be great. And questions about when the next Crossroads will be and whether they're going virtual I saw from Kelly that they are going virtual, and a little more info about Crossroads, because those of us who have done it, I think, have really been so impacted by it. So if anybody has any more info about that.
Well, Hurst is on here, Kelly Hurst.
Yeah. Can I just say that, yeah, part of what I was hoping to share was that we're taking our work digitally, and since that's how we're all connected anyway, I know this isn't a silver lining because it's a really hard thing to pull out of this incredible trauma that we're all in. But it's that we are connected this way, and if Crossroads can actually take our work and make it available much more widely to institutions, that's exactly where we're going. So right now we're fulfilling our current contracts that did not get fulfilled during the months of COVID of March, April, and May. And then we should be ready to do some digital work starting in July.
Great. And one of the things that Dr. Bowers was talking about earlier is just even developing some work on the Hive and an anti-racism toolkit where we can start putting in articles for people to be able to read. And at this point, I want to thank Dr. McNeese for being so bold to bring Crossroads to SIU School of Medicine. We've had many opportunities that have, the work that you have started really has helped us to get to this place where it's actually in a larger document now. And so thank you for that. So Dr. Todd, did you have another question on there? I'm not able to see the questions.
There are a couple questions. Touch on the issue of how to be a good ally. And so I'm going to ask one of, I'm going to sort of lump them together. So one of them is on social media, sometimes you can see people's opinions where they say that politicians are race baiting us into believing that the US is racist when really it's not racist. And when you hear those kinds of comments, or you're at work and you hear a comment that you're like, that is a racist comment, what can we say? What can we do? What is the concrete way we push back and respond in the moment and then long term?
Yeah, I'll just make a quick comment that the first thing that we need to do is to make sure that the moment doesn't pass without anybody saying anything, because everybody who watches it, I mean, we just saw what happened for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. That was not around without other people being present. If somebody had interjected and then somebody would have said something, that it would have changed the life of a person and of a whole community. So we have to make sure that we don't just have bystanders, but we have upstanders. And I think moving in and saying, even if you don't know what to say, I'm sorry, I just want to acknowledge that something was just happened that I'm really uncomfortable with. And then you can always come back to it later on. Or you can say, excuse me, can you help me understand what you just said? And then most of the time people will say, well, that wasn't my intent. But once you help people understand the impact, that might have not been the intent, but your impact was this, then it starts to create another conversation. Because people have blind spots. You know, people have blind spots. One thing I've seen is like people are afraid to even sit down and have a conversation with me because they're afraid to, and I said, we're not going to get anywhere unless we sit down and just be vulnerable. Dr. Cruz, you look like you're thinking real hard. Do you have anything to say on this? I could feel the thinking.
You know, I just wanted to say, and boy, you're pretty perceptive, I'll tell you that, first of all. But I just want to say that the response to my message has been overwhelmingly positive with actually good ideas. But, you know, I've gotten a few negatives, and I'm just going to mention 3 of them right now. So one person said, well, you know, you mentioned that, but you don't mention Black on Black violence, okay? And then the other one was, well, you know, all of this stems from poverty in urban areas, which was caused by the actions of the liberal Democratic politicians. Those are tough, you know, those folks are like, that's like ingrained things that are hard to change, I think. But the other one was really very interesting. It was SIU is SIU School of Medicine is not a racist organization. We see that comes to us for care. We're not racist. And so the concept of being an anti-racist organization, I think, is a hard one to understand. But for that comment, I think there's some real hope with the kind of response that you mentioned, Wendi. And I'd be happy to have some suggestions on ways to respond to those first two as well, because I've not responded to any of them yet.
Well, we can talk some more about that offline, Dr. Cruz. I think I have some suggestions for you.
Let's do it offline. That's a good idea.
Dr. Todd, did you have another question on there?
A couple more. There are some more questions, but there's a great comment. I would love to hear people's response to this comment. So here we go. SIU leadership gave the COVID pandemic the highest priority for their institutional efforts, which did lead to the transformation of our clinical and educational realities in a very short time. What if we gave the same priority to anti-racism education and the transformation of SIUSOM?
I just made a new good friend. All right.
Good point.
Dr. Todd, Dr. McNeese, you put your hand up. Did you want to say something?
I was going to say, what indeed, if we were to do that, indeed, we would move forward with much more rapidity. There would be less gradualism about this whole thing. Indeed, if that were a top priority. Why not?
Great. I want to pull our students in. Even to that last question, Beret, can you, and Alex, can you talk a little bit about what allyship feels like to you? What does it mean to you?
Well, I've been on a new wave where I am more, I guess, sick and tired of silent allies. And for me, allyship doesn't mean that you just come talk to me on the low about what's going on, but that's not personally or actively what you express to the world or to your family or to anybody else, because I think change comes with us being willing to stand alone and fight for what's right and speak out against injustices. And so I love that comment because I think that's very true. We talk about, or our little pack session of, we talk about anti-racism, we talk about filling out a card saying how you feel, but talking means nothing when there's no action behind it. So I think ally is important when they're willing to stand with you, if that means them jeopardizing their own at the end or looked at a little differently among their Caucasian colleagues or something like that.
Alex, did you want to add?
Oh, I totally agree with Beret. Ally means you're not just silent. You're not just telling me, oh yeah, I support you, or oh, how are you doing? It's you at that peaceful protest saying, oh, I support my Black, the community. I support my Black classmates. At that protest, there's a beautiful image that was shared on the SIU Medicine Instagram and the webpage of multiple different types of people of different colors at that protest with us a couple days ago. That's an ally. You're right next to me. You're not behind me just saying, oh, are you okay? You're there taking action. You're not silent. You're not just only posting the blackout picture on Instagram. You're saying something, you're speaking about it. You're also educating yourself every other day. You're also making yourself aware and making sure anyone else doesn't have bad experiences and protecting, the Black students as well.
Great.
Can I just add one more thing, Dr. El-Amin? I'm sorry.
Please.
And I was going to also just say, and I think an ally is also someone who doesn't come with the white savior complex, because a lot of times we experience in that. So it's more about how can I help you? What do you need? And how can I actively support you along the way? So yeah.
Great.
Something that I think really resonates with folks who are in the field of healthcare is if the person beside you breaks their leg and has an injury, you don't turn to them and say, well, you better, you know, what are you going to do about your broken leg? You help them because you're not the awesome injury and you can do something. You are good. You can do something. That person just underwent a trauma. They need your help. And so that makes sense to us when somebody falls down in the street and breaks their leg. It should make the same kind of sense to us when we're standing in an elevator and somebody makes a remark.
Yeah.
Sure. Or what do you do?
I think the other piece is that our work around this can be life or death. If we have patients that we're not reaching out to, or we have patients that don't feel comfortable coming, or we have patients that are speaking in another language and they're not able to communicate, and we're not communicating in their language, there's so many different possible ways that one little turn can be a life or death decision. And that's why we have to make sure, you know, right now they're naming out all the names, you know, of all the individuals that have been affected by police brutality. But when we look at the statistics, a lot of times you hear, oh, there's 80,000 plus deaths that have been lost for health disparities without us saying those names. We need to keep in mind that these are our mothers, our fathers, our babies, our children. Dr. Bowers, are you going to say something?
I just wanted to add a comment. Thank you so much, Beret and Alexander, for really verbalizing what that means to you. And I also wanted to add that there's so much, you know, moving fast, and there's a lot of information being put out, and I think there's a lot of energy and people want to contribute and start doing things. And I just wanted to add the component that to consider that if there's some things that you wish you could do as an ally, but you can't do, like, for example, if you wish you could be at a protest, but you can't be at a protest because, like me, I have little kids and I, you know, can't necessarily make it to everything that I want to be at, that there are so many ways that that can look like, whether that's contributing to bail funds, or actually just doing the work of, you know, educating yourself, you know, reaching out and learning about it. So I just wanted to add the other component, the depth, I should say, the depth and the breadth that allyship extends to, that, you know, that I have to always remind myself of as I learn on this journey, in that there are so many ways that that can look like, even when you're not actively present in a room with somebody else.
Anything else, Dr. Todd? Do you have any other questions in the queue?
Yes. Two more. The first one is, what do people think about white coats for Black lives? And just in the last few days, there have been a flurry of emails about that. Alexander, if you want to speak to that from the student side, I can from the faculty side. There is a question about what people feel like, it's unrelated, when you're in the room with the patient, and it's just you and the patient, and they feel is a racist comment. How do people react to that? So first, what about White Coats for Black Lives? That's a student-led movement.
Yes, so White Coats for Black Lives, student-led movement, multiple chapters at different organizations, and seems like, especially during the events now, more medical students are trying to adapt this movement and adapt this organization for medical students, physicians, people in healthcare, to support the importance of Black lives and showing that Black lives matter. For example, at Indiana University, they had an event where they did a peaceful march, and also they had different physicians, med students, talking about their experiences with racism, and they talked about the racial and ethnic disparities within the Black communities. And it sounds like we are in the talks of establishing an organization here at SIU School of Medicine, and hopefully we can make an event ourselves here on campus through the whole White Coats Black Lives organization.
Great. For time's sake, I know that it's, go ahead, Dr. Todd.
I was going to say around the time of Michael Brown and the Ferguson protests, I know that some of the students at SIU were thinking about it, but they weren't 100% sure they were going to have faculty support. And I just want to let you know, Alex, and we've email corresponded. Over the last couple of days, the faculties have been talking about this and talking about how we really want to indicate to the students that there is a ton of faculty support for opening a chapter here at SIU.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
And I know that we're at the end of our time together, but I did want to at least address what the last question was, is what do you do when your patient and you think your patient has said something that's racist? Here at SIU School of Medicine, we're not tolerating that. And I think that number one, you need to make sure that you take care of yourself and that you are feeling safe. And sometimes that means excusing yourself from the room. Sometimes that means saying something to the patient at that time. Sometimes that means your provider who you're working with, if you're a student, stepping in and saying something and saying that that's not who we are at SIU School of Medicine. That will not be tolerated. We are also in the process of working on some patient anti-discrimination policies to make sure that people are actually supported. And I think that that's something that people don't realize happens quite frequently for those of us that are of color. And we have to bring some of those stories to light so that people understand what that feels like and why we do need people to step in and continue to, as Dr. Spross says, protect, listen, and connect. So on that note, I would like to thank our panelists for being present, for being vulnerable, for speaking up. And I really appreciate the energy that was in the room, the support in the different solidarity processions that we're doing, the support in different actions that faculty have been making to make sure that our students are supported during this time means a tremendous, I just have tremendous gratitude at this point. I'm happy to be here at SIU School of Medicine. So look forward to our next discussion that we will continue to have. We're also starting some collective healing circles to support our students and our residents to make sure that their concerns are heard and that they are supported during this time. And we're trying our best to stay proximate to you all. So thank you.
Everyone are going to be communicating with the school about when are the best times to continue to have these conversations recurrently. There are a number of great things that came up. So we will keep a transcript of these comments. I will keep it. We're not going to distribute it in any way, but there are so many great topics that got brought up in the chat that we do need to talk about as a community. So thank you very, 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 very much for being here. Being here is part of the work. Thank you for doing it, and we'll keep talking.
And if you need to, send me an email, but I promise it will take me some time to get to it. My box is exploding. I'm doing my best. That's all I can say. I'm doing my best. All right, take care. Thank you, students, the future Dr. Wendi Madden and the future Dr. Alexander Royks.
Thanks for having us.
All right.
Thanks for having us.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you all so
Christine,
much.
are you able?
Thanks, Christine.
Oh, you're welcome. Christine, are you able to save or? I can't hear you. Can you hear me?
It's, hold on.
Just make sure you save the chat. I just want to make sure we have the chat and that you have the recording.
I'm going to make sure, we have to be careful about, I think, how we distribute this and stuff, because the transcripts
I
has
don't
names and
want
things like that. And
I don't want it distributed. I just want it to save it.
Yeah.
No, I don't want to send it out anywhere. I just want to save it. I always save the chat so that I can go back for reference and look at what people, because I haven't had time to read it.
I'm not going to close the session one because I have to figure out how to make sure I did record the session, but how to record to do the transcript, but I will before I get off this call.
Okay, are other
I
people
won't
still
lose
on
it.
this call?
There's a ton of good stuff there. There are 3 or 4 people still on this call.
Okay. It's hard for me to read the chat as I'm going through, as I'm on this. I haven't gotten to that place in WebEx
Wendy,
where I can actually. Hello? Hello? Oh, your voice is going in and out. I'm not able to hear you.
There we go, finally.